don't know how many snaps that was, guys, but welcome back to review and discussion for UnOrdinary episode 332. Yeah, I remember. I remember episodes. I totally remember episodes. Anyway, this episode is a very, very interesting, and I do think it's a very good episode. There's good conversation here. Now, the episode starts out with Arlo walking around holding a flyer of Untitled, looking it over. And as he's looking at it, he thinks to himself, another mess to clean up. What I really liked about this scene is, to me, it seems as though he is still willing to try and protect the others, or at least help them out in some capacity. Even though he knows that if he does try to further, it could definitely have serious repercussions for him. So I think it's really telling that even after all that he's been through recently, even after what Valerie has told him, Arlo still has the mentality of, like, I have to try and help the others somehow. I have to try and cover their tracks somehow. So that's a really cool moment on Arlo's part, honestly. So a student then bumps into him running off as Arlo grabs him and tells him not to run in the halls. But the student warns him that John has started a fight with Zeke. So Arlo then rushes over and he sees John wailing on Zeke, who's telling him and kind of yelling at everyone that the bureau to come for him, that Zeke can tell the bureau to come for him. Tell them to come after William and Jane's son, basically. As other students start running away, thinking that John has freaked out. John has, snapped again. And to their credit, John has snapped again. But Arlo rushes over to try and calm John down so that he doesn't get into trouble. Again, Arlo's still trying to have everyone's back. But John yells at Arlo and everyone else around in the hall about what the Bureau did to William and Jane. Again, he yells this out. But I'm not sure if anyone else takes note of this, not even Zeke, as we only see Arlo's reaction to the news, as Arlo's just like, what is he yelling about? He hasn't freaked out like this in a long time. So Arlo then tells everyone to leave, even Zeke, and they all go. They all head out. We've seen in the past Zeke kind of sneaking, listening in on their conversations. We don't get that in this episode. But after everyone leaves, Arlo asks John, what's wrong? He asks him what happened. And John tells him about both of his parents in fairly big detail. Tells them that Arlo finally learns that William, John's father, was the one who wrote UnOrdinary. And he also tells him about what's happening to Jane, that she's been taken by the authorities, and they're using her ability to murder all the high tier heroes, like Ray, and taking his ability. And this is where this episode really, really gets good, in my opinion. So John then brings up their old conversation at Woba Boba from way back when in season 1, where Arlo said that he looked up to Ray. John then asks Arlo how he can work for the people who murdered his mentor, a person that Arlo himself said he really looks up to. And they're going to use Ray's ability, the ability that Ray used for good, to murder even more people. John then also John tells Arlo that he is aware of all he's done for everyone, for all of them, for him, for Sarah, for Remy, Blake, and Ison. John is totally acknowledging the fact, but tells Arlo if he chooses to work for the Bureau despite knowing what they've done, John is willing to cut Arlo out too, like Sarah did, and warns Arlo to watch his back. because John is willing to go to war with Arlo again. Now, I understand why John's upset. I absolutely understand why John's upset. John brings up a good point. They're using his mother's ability to spread harm to other people. And because of that ability, they're using Ray's ability now to hurt other people too. They're going to keep using both of their abilities to hurt even more and more people. I understand why John is very upset. Arlo is aware of a lot of the things the Bureau has done. He's not aware of everything. He wasn't aware about Jane until recently. But he was aware that they did have Ray's ability. Ison told him that. But Arlo's not in the Bureau for the sake of his own career, for the sake of his own betterment. This was a guise that he put up in front of Remy. And in truth, he's been trying and still is, based on the intro to this chapter. He's in it so he can try his best to make sure that everyone is covered, that he can expose Ember from the inside out, and protect his friends, protect the people that he cares about, to make sure that they can't go to prison or worse. I get why John is upset. I totally understand. And I definitely think in this moment, John is very emotional. And I think John will continue to be emotional for a few episodes. But I get John's perspective, but John also knows the real reason why Arlo's there. John does know that Arlo can be trusted. He just doesn't want to think about it right now. Based on this episode, I do think there are a few different routes that will go from here, but we'll talk about that when they get to it. But John does tell Arlo, if you still choose to work for them, I'll know just how shitty of a person you are. Again, it is hard to say, but even me, the number one Arlo hater, I am willing to say Arlo continuing to still work for the Bureau so he can help the others out, that doesn't make him a shitty person. It wouldn't. It would be a very nuanced and difficult conversation. You could consider it a necessary evil. Now, if Arlo gets involved with Ember and starts murking high tiers in order to expose them, that's gonna be an entirely different conversation. Because again, like I mentioned in the previous review and discussion, and I think I even mentioned it during the reaction to this episode, I highly doubt that everyone who works at the Bureau is just an awful person like those working with Ember. I've said before, Keon is a shitty person, but I don't think Keon's aware of everything that's happening. And I don't know what Keon would say if he knew everything that was going on. When it came to John, Keon was obviously very abusive, but when he saw John what he think was getting better, he was like, John, it's good to see you. I'm glad you're doing better. That's not saying much though, because Valerie is also very two-faced when it comes to Arlo. Never mind. Nonetheless, I understand why John's upset, but who knows? Who knows if Arlo's going to keep working with the Bureau because of what happens next. We cut to after school as Arlo gets back to his apartment. We see that the conversation with John has clearly taken a toll on him. This new information that has been revealed, that the Bureau killed a man who wrote a book. Arlo's the last person who hasn't read UnOrdinary. We saw him with a flyer. He may either go to everyone and read the original. He may download. He may use the flyer. Oh. Or what if he gets caught with the flyer? Nonetheless, we see that the conversation has taken a toll on him. He is very worn out, and he has a heart-to-heart with himself. He laments, He laments that he thought that in the department he chose to go into anti-corruption. He thought he'd be able to fish out the Ember agents and, kind of like bring truth to the people and get justice for Ray. But the more and more he dives into everything, he's starting to realize that he will most likely never get the chance to do that. And the weight of what could possibly happen to the others, he starts to think like they did this to Ray's ability. What would have happened if Seraphina had gotten caught? What's going to happen to Headmaster Vaughn if he gets caught? What's going to happen to Remy and everyone? He starts to think of everything that's could potentially happen, which very well could happen if they do get captured, and it starts to weigh on him. He is clearly like Arlo is very interesting in this episode. We've seen Arlo down before. We've seen Arlo we've seen Arlo tired. We've seen him kind of lost when it came to like how to handle John. But Arlo, and even when he lost to John, Arlo never really seemed defeated. But now, just the absolute weight of everything going on him and the realizations, the breakthroughs that are happening in his mind, we see a very broken Arlo in this episode. We see a beaten Arlo in this episode. We see he starts to imagine what could happen to everyone. The bags in his eyes are getting heavier even than they were before. And then his alarm goes off, and we see that he has to get ready for work. We then cut to Cassandra, who's just working on some sort of case, most likely Vaughn or the trio. But he goes to her and asks for some time off, saying something similar to what Sarah told John when she originally left. When Cassandra just asked, oh yeah, like how much time do you need? Like, is school just like kicking your butt? But Arlo tells her, I don't know when I'll be back. And Cassandra immediately takes notice of this, and she asks if everything is okay. And he asks if they can talk in private, which she obliges. Arlo then asks her how close she was with Ray, because, they both have a connection to him. And it's here that we kind of get a little bit of her backstory, and she tells him that Ray was kind of like her little brother, similar to how I assume Ray viewed Arlo since he asked Arlo to look after Remy, that kind of thing. I definitely think Ray might have looked at Arlo like a little brother. And we also get a glimpse into that him and Kuyo were seemingly on good terms even when they got to the later years at Wellston. We see that they both went to visit Cassandra, I assume, at Wellston University. So that's interesting. I believe Uru did confirm that she is going to go further into Ray's backstory. So I am very curious how Ray was able to turn someone like Kuyo. Because this was also before UnOrdinary. Anyway. So, Cassandra kind of tells Arlo that, I was pretty close with Ray. But she then kind of thinks for a second, asks why she's bringing him up so suddenly. And that's when Arlo asks her what she would do if she learned that Ember was actually part of the authorities. And actually, let me check real quick, because I don't think, now that I'm thinking about it, he didn't tell Cassandra what happened to Ray. So no, but I think Cassandra, he doesn't explicitly say that, but I think she realizes what he's getting to, because she does explicitly say it's too bad that Ember got to him. And then Arlo immediately interjects with, what would you do if you learned what Ember really was? And Cassandra immediately has a moment that she gets on edge. It's kind of similar to how Arlo got when he first learned this info. She asks Arlo why he would think something so ridiculously. And again, to Cassandra's fairness, it's a completely normal reaction to have. When Remy just shouted out at Arlo, "Your aunt's a fucking murderer and she killed my brother," Arlo's immediately reaction was just, "Are you fucking insane? What is your problem?" So Cassandra's reaction just being like, "What? Don't, like, do not joke about that. Like, you can get in serious trouble." I cannot fault Cassandra's fault at all, but she asks if he has any proof, and he just says, "Not necessarily." And to be fair, there's not a lot of tangible proof that they can use right off the bat. There isn't. They have a lot of leads, and they know that the Bureau that Ember is a subsidiary of the Bureau of Authority, but they can't really go to the public with that. They got their hands on enhancers, they got their hands on Spectre research, but they don't have their hands on that anymore. And Serafina left with that info. Serafina doesn't have access to that info anymore, and she's the one who saw it firsthand. Remy, Blake, and I said they've encountered the Bureau of Authority. Remy knows that Valerie is Vulcan, but they can't really do that. And honestly, I don't know if Cassandra would be willing to listen to kids who are fugitives. So it's hard. It is a tricky situation because Arlo doesn't really have any proof. But maybe Cassandra is willing to listen to Ray's little sister. Maybe Cassandra is willing to hear about the burns and slashes that were on Ray's body were caused by the same woman that Remy herself encountered. Nonetheless, the seed of doubt has been planted within Cassandra. Whether or not she believes it, that seed has now been planted. She agrees to let Arlo take his leave, but warns him not to let anyone else hear him talk like that, and he heads off. I think the revelation that Valerie either was or was there, because it could have been Byron, it could have been Brims, but Valerie is the common denominator when it comes to Ray's death. So, we're going to have to wait and see. But I think the reveal to Arlo, and probably to Cassandra, but definitely to Arlo, that his aunt was the one who killed his beloved mentor. The person that Arlo looked up to the most. Because that's the thing. Way back when, Arlo could have said Valerie. Valerie clearly means a lot to Arlo, but he didn't say his aunt. He said Ray. Someone with completely different ideals from Arlo. Completely different. But Arlo still respected, and Arlo still was willing to say, "They're who I look up to." But I think the news that Valerie was there, at least, when Ray died, I don't know how he'll be able to handle that, honestly. I don't know how Cassandra will be able to handle that. What if Cassandra goes to Valerie? Valerie tells her the truth. Cassandra's like, why would you do that? And Valerie just kills Cassandra because, like, okay, you're clearly not on our side and you clearly know too much. Bye, bitch. Or don't do that. And if you do that, you absolutely need to send me my check. But that will be it for this review and discussion. Back-to-back nines, honestly, insane. Back-to-back-to-back nines, honestly, insane. I'm gonna stick with this. So episode 330 was Remy and John and Remy. Episode 331 was John and Blake. Episode 332 was John and Arlo. Uru, you gotta finish the solos. You have to finish the solos, Uru. Episode 333 has to be John and Ison. You have to get that one-on-one interaction. You gotta do it. Come on. But yeah, these last few episodes have all been really good. One last thing I do want to touch on. One last thing I want to touch on. John breaking. I talked about this in the live reaction. Guys, we all love seeing Zeke get his shit kicked in. We all love seeing John go haywire. And I get it. I do get it. The most sauce in the series is when John lets loose. But we have to remember, John still wants to be better. Going on a murder spree, reverting back to the Shadow King to New Boston, just for the sake of getting revenge, that's not what William would have wanted. I think William would want John to get revenge for his death. Yes, but I don't think he wants his son to become no more ruthless than the Bureau themselves in order to get justice for him. I think William does want John to spread the word of UnOrdinary or to make a change. He wants John to help people. The book was written for John. But reverting back to who he was before, that's not the hero of UnOrdinary. That's not the person that William wrote about. That's not the person John wants to be. John doesn't want to just be angry anymore. He wants to be someone that Sarah, that his dad, that he can be proud of. And going on a path of bloodshed wouldn't be the way. I think William would be very proud that John has decided to help out the others and spread UnOrdinary to keep William alive. But I also think William would be a little sad to hear that his son lost his way again. Just my 2 cents. Let me know what you guys all think down in the comments. As always, everyone, thank you for an awesome episode, Uru. Let me know what you all think down below. And guys, see you, Space Cowboy.